Readers of fiction love a good story. A story with some romance and a bit of love. But it seems that of recent, there is less focus on the love theme. And yet you have chosen that theme for your first novel. Why have you gone that way?
I've always liked romance. I sort of was brought up, if you wish, in the Mills and Boone era. So I guess in that regard, I always would like to, or always like to inject a bit of romance into it, though around the plot and the theme, I do like to bring up topical issues. But I felt that it was important to inject some romance in there as opposed to just being within a relationship and ignoring that aspect, leaving it in the background. I really wanted to make it spicy and fiery, which I did.
And you're satisfied with that work?
I think I am. I'm very satisfied, actually. Yes, I wouldn't say I think. I am pretty satisfied, yes.
Congratulations on your first novel, and I'm
Thank
sure
you.
there are many more in the offing.
Thank you.
Tell us about that first novel. Just a quick plot synopsis of your first novel.
Okay, it starts off with the protagonist, age 15. I chose that. Well, let's rewind a little bit. I didn't actually start off with that. It starts off with her being 15 and relocating to London, England due to the death of her grandparents, who were also her caretakers, sorry. And then 13 years later, when she's 28, she's married in an unhappy marriage with 3 children, and that's when the emotion starts with the problems she's having within the marriage. I didn't actually include the first bit first. It was more or less an afterthought, which is why, from her coming here. So she was in a happy life in London, in Georgetown, Guyana, the lovely quiet town of Queenstown. Grew up with her grandparents, who were fairly established within their field of work. And at 15, they died, and she was sent to London, England, to join a mother who had initially abandoned her, or so she feels, and was subsequently rejected. 13 years later, it goes into that, and then you go through the backstory with how she, within those 13 years age gap, you have the backstory with that tells you how she got assimilated into London life, how she met her husband and all of that. But she's in a very unhappy marriage, and I don't want to go into too much of the plot because then it'll be telling too much of the story. But essentially, a lot of her problems are emotive. It's internal. She's internalized a lot of stuff. Of course, the deaths of her grandparents, who were very close to her as well. So she has internalized a lot. But then she steps out of her comfort zone and gets involved in an extramarital affair, which is where the spicy love bit comes in. And throughout the book, you learn how she overcomes adversity and how she deals with that extramarital affair.
Right, so much for the synopsis. We'll refer to that now that we've laid on that foundation as to the structure of the novel.
Okay.
And other bits of writing.
Sure.
Because I see that you have a passion for writing.
I do.
In such a way that you're beginning to impart tips on writing. But let's locate Cherry-Ann first.
Okay.
Born in Guyana, in Newtown, Georgetown, and relocated in your teens to the United Kingdom, where you studied English literature and Caribbean studies. Good for you. And then you're now based in the
I actually live in California, but I have a base in Toronto as well.
So you've moved from place to place. It's another good subject to talk about. Writers moving from place to place, and writers writing from a distance, how much they can say from a distance, and the things you can gather while you move from place to place. So you move from place to place, doing essentially writing.
I wouldn't say essentially writing per se. My life in London was within corporate England, but then later on I became a sports journalist and an editor. So my passion for writing came out later, if you wish, within that realm. But due to personal reasons, I chose to relocate to the United States, and so I currently live in California. And one of my plans at the time when I did that was to really throw myself into my passion, which is writing. So essentially that's what I did, but I sort of meandered into coaching and editing as well, which is a separate aspect of my business.
Quickly, let's touch on your poetry. fiction, poetry, journalistic writing. Wow, you're quite a rounded person. I mean, dabbling in all forms of writing.
Yes.
Tell me about your poetry.
Poetry in itself, it was more of a hobby. I think it was an extension from school, because
Mhm.
you may remember in school it was something that was, part of our English work, composition and grammar and all of that. And poetry was there. So it's not really something that I feel personally that I would like to focus on too
Focus
much.
on
But I do actually enjoy doing it. I think I've actually written enough to put an anthology together, but I have actually published three, and one of them is very special to me. And you and I had a pre-talk before I came on here, and we talked about my professor, Dr. Cherry-Ann,
Yeah.
who taught at the University of North London.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
one of my
mhm.
poems was actually inspired from one of his Caribbean Studies classes, which I actually presented to him when I was leaving university. So it's not something that I sit down and totally focus on like I do with writing, where I would sit down and plot out my chapters and outlines and things like that.
Mhm,
It's more of an inspiration, a burst of inspiration. So depending on my mood or what have you. But I thoroughly enjoy it. And I like the fact that I can freestyle.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't particularly like getting caught up in all of the structures that are involved in
Seeing
that
that
per
you're
se.
given instruction on writing,
Mhm.
let's say you sort of an authority in writing. Take us through the novel. Take us through your novel, your first novel, Whisper of Lies, a first book, with some of the pitfalls and other concomitants of a first novel. But take us through that first novel, bearing in mind that we're talking about the structure of,
Okay.
Go right ahead.
I chose to. There are several sub-characters in there.
Mhm.
Naturally, there's a main protagonist, so the focus is around her. But I wrote it in a way where I included the sub-characters and weave them in, so that towards the end, it all comes to, it links to a degree. So what I chose to do within this one is I gave each chapter a character. So if I'm talking about Lavinia, it'll be her point of view. She's the main protagonist. If I'm speaking about another one, I give them a chapter. But it all weaves together towards the end.
Towards the end.
So there's a nexus between it all, even though it may not necessarily affect the main protagonist. There is an emotive nexus to it because, for example, she may be friends with one of the characters. So whatever
It
issues
goes
that
on,
she
there's a
has,
continuity,
she will empathize
right?
with her, or sympathize with her, or assist her as a friend, if you wish, or what have you. So I chose to actually label each character, each chapter with a character's name, and it would go. Then you would hear their story.
That is the printed word.
Mhm.
You've moved into the world of e-literature. How much do we know about e-literature in Guyana? Um, Explain to us something, what's going on in the world of e-books and e-literature.
It is escalating.
Yeah.
I I think most writers now, if they do a printed copy, they also have a Kindle format. It allows a lot of writers to self-publish and give them a start, perhaps to build their confidence. Because if you go via the traditional means, which I'm sure you're aware of, it is a very long-winded process.
It is, and you may never see, or the book may never see the day of light.
There's that too. It's like anything else. It has its pros and it has its cons. And with regards to the traditional aspect, my personal view right now, I think part of it is prestige. Perhaps if you're published by one of the major six, the big
Of
six
course.
houses, there's that
Absolutely.
element of prestige that goes with it. But as I coach my clients, on a daily basis, it's all about marketing. It really does not matter whether you go the self-publishing route, whether it's an e-book or a printed book, or whether you go to traditional book. It's all about the marketing. But e-books, coming back to your question, I think allows wannabe writers to really get their foot in the door and perhaps gain confidence. There are other elements that needs to go in place in terms of credibility. It's not the done thing to just slap something together and just say, hey, I'm an author, I have an ebook, which many people do.
So how would you know the good from the bad if you're a reader or consumer?
I think readers are very intelligent. That's another thing I think a lot of want-to-be writers or novice writers do. They underestimate the intelligence of the readers. But just because a reader is not a writer, it doesn't mean that they will not notice when something isn't right, even if perhaps they can't put it into the fictional world or what have you. They will know.
Yeah.
So it's very important not to underestimate the reader's mentality. So they will know.
I like that. I like that.
Yes.
Very often time we do think, or that the reader is sort of below us as artists, or the consumers below us, and whatever we do is wholesome and good and perfect. But I'll tell you, which leads me to something else now, about literary criticism, the role of literary criticism. And perhaps we may do another piece on literary criticism, how the reader will look at a publication, and how the critic perhaps will make or break a writer.
Right.
But let's get back to Cherry-Ann Carew and her writing. You've done some other writings. How to do books. You have one here. How the fairs handle fair.
Right.
There's others. Let me just quickly. Authors, expose yourself. Elements to writing in layman's terms, a 10-step guide for novice writers, and so on and so forth. You coach writing.
Yes.
Your passion is there, but yet you wanted to share that passion. You wanted other persons to be able to express themselves. And I love that. I really love that.
So do I. So do I. I mean, I come across many people who you hear, I've always wanted to write a book, but, they don't have the confidence or they don't know where to start or what have you. And like anything, there's a system to it. And if you don't know it, it appears to be hard. So with regards to the In Layman Terms series that I'm putting together, that is essentially to help writers. I really do get a buzz. Actually, today, I'd like to take the opportunity to wish one of my clients, Bitten Twice, who is launching her book, that I had the pleasure of editing, and it's her second book. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that that's the buzz I get from it. This is someone who is a very talented writer, and because she lacked confidence and didn't really know where to go, and she came to me, I was able to guide her.
Beautiful.
And now she has 2 books. So I do have a passion, not for just personally writing, but to see others be able to do that.
I like that.
Yes.
Sometimes we do forget the enablers of our literature, the people that helps. Editors are important. The people that read and proofread, they're all those support people.
Yeah.
They
sometimes
are
just
important.
one question could have a breakthrough for someone because they're holding on to this one question that they don't have the correct answer, if you wish, or a logical answer, and they would just sit on their books for years. Because of not knowing, and hence that leads to lack of confidence.
I'm glad that we're having this discourse, because we've talked about the structure of writing, we've talked about writing, we've talked about marketing, very, very important to sell yourself. We've also touched a bit on the e-literature, which is slowly or quickly.
It is quickly, actually, yes. It's actually taken over the printed books in terms of sales. So it's not something to be ignored at all.
I may have to talk to you off the program, because I've got about 3 novels. They're all unpublished.
Okay.
So
we'll have to talk.
I'm glad the viewers perhaps will get onto it.
Right.
Very often time we want a book, in this form. I love a book like this. I love book. I love going through a book.
Yes.
I love the smell and the feel and the touch, the intimacy of having one-on-one with the writer. But we've touched on so many things. We've talked about the readers, how the reader will see your work and things like that. What is left now is to wish you good luck in your other ventures.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully we can see you more often in Guyana, adding more to our bookshelves.
Right, yes.
Thank
Hopefully
you
I'll
so
take
very
over the
much.
bookshelves. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.